Sunset over the Willow Creek by Audrey Sinclair. The autumn of 1847 brought with it a peculiar chill to the small town of Willow Creek, Virginia. The leaves had begun their annual transformation, painting the landscape in hues of amber and crimson. Through this picturesque setting rode Eliza Montgomery, her chestnut mare trotting steadily along the winding dirt road that led to her family's estate. At 22, Eliza possessed a quiet dignity that belied her youth. Her mahogany hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though rebellious tendrils escaped to frame her face. The daughter of a successful merchant, she had been granted liberties uncommon for women of her era, education, travels, and a measure of independence that many envied. As she approached the white-columned mansion that had been her home since birth, Eliza noticed an unfamiliar carriage in the circular drive. The crest adorning its side belonged to no family she recognized from local society. Curiosity piqued, she urged her horse forward. Miss Montgomery, called Jenkins, the family's long-serving butler, as she dismounted. "Your father has requested your presence in the study. He has a guest." Eliza raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she removed her riding gloves and straightened her forest green riding habit. Whatever unexpected visitor had arrived, proper decorum demanded she present herself appropriately. The study door stood ajar, and her father's robust laughter echoed into the hallway, a sound that had become increasingly rare since her mother's passing 3 years prior. She paused, knocked softly, and entered. "Ah, Eliza," her father exclaimed, rising from his leather chair. "Come in, my dear. I'd like you to meet Mr. Nathaniel Blackwood of New York." The stranger turned, and Eliza found herself momentarily arrested by the intensity of his gaze. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, with features that spoke of both refinement and determination. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and his attire, though clearly expensive, lacked the ostentatious quality common among wealthy men seeking to display their fortune. "Miss Montgomery," he said, his voice carrying a subtle northern accent, "your father has spoken highly of you." "Mr. Blackwood?" she replied with a polite curtsy. "I hope your journey to Virginia was pleasant." "As pleasant as any long journey can be," he answered with a hint of amusement. "Though I must confess, the beauty of your countryside has made it worthwhile." Her father beamed with obvious pleasure. "Nathaniel is here on business, Eliza. His shipping company is interested in establishing a partnership with our mercantile." Something in her father's tone suggested there was more to this meeting than mere business, but Eliza maintained her composure. "How fortunate for us. Perhaps Mr. Blackwood would care to join us for dinner." "I've already extended the invitation," her father replied. "In fact, Mr. Blackwood will be staying with us for the next fortnight while we discuss the particulars of our arrangement." Eliza's eyebrows rose slightly, but she kept her countenance neutral. A fortnight was an unusually long time for business negotiations, particularly for a man who surely had pressing matters awaiting him in New York. "Then I shall inform Mrs. Collins to prepare a room," she said, referring to their housekeeper. "Already done," her father replied, his enthusiasm unmistakable. "Nathaniel, why don't you freshen up before dinner? Jenkins will show you to your quarters." As if on cue, the butler appeared at the doorway. Mr. Blackwood bowed slightly to Eliza before following Jenkins from the room. Once alone with her father, Eliza folded her arms across her chest. "A fortnight, father? What business could possibly require such an extended stay?" Samuel Montgomery's expression turned sheepish. "My dear Mr. Blackwood is not merely a business associate. He's the son of my old friend Charles Blackwood, who passed last winter." "I see," Eliza said, though she didn't entirely. And, her father continued, lowering his voice, "he's a widower, Eliza. Lost his wife in childbirth not 2 years ago. The child, too." Eliza's expression softened. "That's truly tragic." "Indeed. He's been consumed by his work since then, according to Charles's letters before his passing. I thought perhaps," he trailed off, but his meaning was clear. "Father," Eliza sighed, "you cannot be matchmaking again. I merely invited a respected businessman to discuss a mutually beneficial partnership," he protested, though his eyes twinkled with mischief. "If he happens to be unmarried, and you happen to be unmarried, well, that's merely coincidence." Eliza shook her head but couldn't suppress a small smile. Since her mother's death, her father had made several thinly veiled attempts to find her a suitable husband. While she cherished her independence, she recognized the reality of her situation. In time she would be expected to marry, and her father's concern came from a place of love. "I'll see you at dinner, father," she said, leaving him to his scheming. Dinner that evening was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Mr. Blackwood proved himself well-read and articulate, discussing literature and current events with equal facility. More importantly to Eliza, he listened when she spoke, engaging with her ideas rather than dismissing them as many men might have done. "You have strong opinions on the abolition movement, Miss Montgomery," he observed after she had expressed her views on the subject. "I believe in fundamental human dignity, Mr. Blackwood," she replied. "My father has never owned slaves, nor will he ever. Our household staff and field workers are all paid wages." A progressive stance for a Virginia family, he noted, his expression revealing nothing of his own position. "And what of your operations in New York?" she challenged. "Do you employ free labor as well?" "I do," he answered, "though I confess it's less controversial there than here in the South." Her father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we might discuss something less politically charged? Nathaniel, did you have opportunity to explore the grounds before dinner?" "I'm afraid not," Mr. Blackwood replied, "though I'd welcome a tour tomorrow if someone would be kind enough to provide one." Samuel Montgomery beamed. "Eliza knows every inch of this property. She'd be delighted to show you around. Wouldn't you, my dear?" Eliza shot her father a look that went unnoticed. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Weather permitting, we could ride out after breakfast." "I look forward to it," Mr. Blackwood said, his gaze lingering on her face a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed. The following morning dawned crisp and clear. Eliza dressed in her riding habit and joined Mr. Blackwood on the front porch, where he waited with 2 saddled horses. "I took the liberty of asking your stable master to prepare the mounts," he explained, holding the reins of her chestnut mare. "How thoughtful," she replied, accepting his assistance as she mounted. "Though I'm perfectly capable of saddling my own horse." "I don't doubt your capabilities, Miss Montgomery," he said as he swung himself into his own saddle with practiced ease. "I simply thought it might save time." They rode in companionable silence for a while, following a path that wound through autumn-colored woods before opening onto a sprawling meadow. "This land has been in my mother's family for 4 generations, Eliza explained as they paused to admire the view. "The original property was a land grant from the Crown before the Revolution." "It's beautiful country," Mr. Blackwood acknowledged. "Different from New York, certainly, but enchanting in its own right." "And what of your home?" Eliza inquired. "Is it in the city itself?" "I have a townhouse in Manhattan," he replied, "but my main residence is a country estate north of the city along the Hudson River. It's a peaceful retreat from the constant bustle of commerce." "Do you spend much time there?" she asked, guiding her horse toward a small stream that cut across the property. A shadow passed over his features. "Not as much as I should. Since Caroline, my wife, passed, I've found it difficult to be there. Too many memories." Eliza felt a pang of sympathy. "I understand. After my mother died, my father buried himself in his business. It was months before he could bear to sit at the dinner table without looking at her empty chair." "Your father is a good man," Mr. Blackwood said softly. "He wrote to me after Caroline's passing. His letter was one of the few that offered genuine comfort rather than empty platitudes." They had reached the stream, and Eliza dismounted to allow her horse to drink. Mr. Blackwood followed suit, standing beside her as they watched the clear water flow over smooth stones. "May I ask how you've occupied yourself since your loss?" Eliza ventured, hoping the question wasn't too forward. "Work, primarily," he admitted. "The shipping company has expanded considerably in the past 2 years. We've added 3 new vessels to our fleet and established trade routes to the West Indies and South America." "An impressive achievement," she acknowledged. "But a hollow one," he added unexpectedly. "Success brings satisfaction but not happiness. I've come to realize that in recent months." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Eliza glimpsed a profound loneliness behind his composed exterior. She recognized it because she had seen it in her own reflection, the peculiar isolation that came from being surrounded by people, yet understood by none. "Perhaps," she suggested gently, "happiness is not something to be achieved, but rather noticed when it appears in small moments." A genuine smile transformed his face. A philosopher as well as a horsewoman. "Your father failed to mention that quality in his descriptions of you." Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "My father, I suspect, has been rather selective in his descriptions of me." "On the contrary," Mr. Blackwood replied, his voice softening, He described you as intelligent, principled, and fiercely independent. Thus far, I've found his assessment entirely accurate." They remounted and continued their ride, the conversation flowing more easily now. By the time they returned to the house for luncheon, Eliza found herself revising her initial impression of Nathaniel Blackwood. Behind his businessman's face lay a man of depth and complexity, one who, like herself, seemed to value authenticity over social conventions. The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were devoted to business discussions between Mr. Blackwood and her father, while afternoons often found Eliza and Mr. Blackwood engaged in various activities, riding, walking the grounds, or discussing books in the library. On the 5th day of his visit, they found themselves caught in a sudden autumn shower while returning from a ride to the far boundary of the property. Racing back toward the house, they instead took shelter in an old stone outbuilding that had once served as a springhouse. "Well," Eliza laughed, removing her sodden hat, "I believe we've been thoroughly drenched." Mr. Blackwood, Nathaniel, as she had begun to think of him, ran a hand through his wet hair. "Indeed, though I must confess I've always found something invigorating about getting caught in the rain." "As have I," she admitted, "though my father despairs of my tendency to return home looking like a drowned cat." "You look nothing of the sort," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "You look alive." The air between them seemed to shift, charged with something Eliza couldn't quite name. She became acutely aware of his proximity in the small space, of the way his wet shirt clung to the contours of his shoulders. "Mr. Blackwood." "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. "After nearly a week in your company, I'd like to think we might dispense with some formalities." "Nathaniel," she amended, finding she liked the sound of his name on her lips. "I believe the rain is letting up. We should return before my father sends out a search party." He nodded, though he made no immediate move toward the door. "Eliza," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I've greatly enjoyed our conversations these past days." "As have I," she replied honestly. "I find myself," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "I find myself thinking of you even when we're apart. Your perspective, your laughter, your challenging questions, they've awakened something in me that I thought died with Caroline." Eliza's breath caught. "Nathaniel." "I don't expect anything," he hurried to add. "I know we've known each other only briefly, but I wanted you to know that meeting you has been significant to me." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I felt it too," she admitted softly. "This connection between us." For a moment, they stood in silence, the rain pattering gently on the roof above. Then, with careful deliberation, Nathaniel reached out and took her hand in his. "May I write to you after I return to New York?" he asked. Eliza smiled, curling her fingers around his. "I would be disappointed if you didn't." The remaining days of Nathaniel's visit passed too quickly. The partnership between his shipping company and her father's mercantile was formalized, but it was clear to everyone, including the increasingly pleased Samuel Montgomery, that business was no longer the primary connection between the two families. On Nathaniel's final evening at Willow Creek, he and Eliza walked along the garden paths as the sun set behind the western hills. A comfortable silence had settled between them, words unnecessary after the hours they had spent in conversation. "I leave for New York tomorrow," he said at last, stating the obvious as they paused beneath the branches of an ancient oak. "Yes," Eliza replied, unable to keep a note of sadness from her voice. "I'll return," he promised. "The partnership with your father will require periodic visits, of course, but," he turned to face her fully, "that's not why I'll come back." Eliza looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "Why will you come back, then?" Instead of answering with words, Nathaniel slowly lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. Eliza's hands came to rest on his shoulders as she returned the kiss, her heart beating rapidly against her ribs. When they finally parted, Nathaniel kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I'll come back because in all my travels, I've never found anyone who makes me feel the way you do, as though the world is full of possibilities again." "And I'll be waiting," Eliza replied softly, "because no one has ever seen me so clearly or valued me so completely." They remained in the garden until the first stars appeared, talking of the future and the letters they would exchange. By the time they returned to the house, a plan had formed. Nathaniel would return in 3 months' time, and they would see where their feelings led them. Winter descended on Willow Creek, bringing with it short days and long nights that Eliza filled with correspondence. Nathaniel's letters arrived regularly, each one revealing more of the man behind the businessman's facade. He wrote of his daily life in New York, of his hopes and fears, and increasingly, of his growing feelings for her. In turn, Eliza shared her thoughts, her dreams, and the gradual awakening of emotions she had never expected to experience. Through their written words, the connection that had begun during those autumn days deepened into something profound and lasting. When March arrived, bringing the first hints of spring to Virginia, Nathaniel returned as promised. As his carriage pulled into the circular drive, Eliza stood on the porch, her pulse quickening at the sight of him. He hardly waited for the carriage to stop before he was out the door, striding toward her with purpose. Without hesitation, he took her hands in his. "Eliza Montgomery," he said, his voice rich with emotion, "these past months have been the happiest I've known in years, simply because your letters have been part of them." "They've been precious to me as well," she replied, squeezing his hands. "I've come to ask a question," he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've come to ask if you would consider becoming my wife." Though she had begun to anticipate this moment in recent weeks, hearing the words aloud still sent a thrill through her. "I would consider it," she replied with a smile, "and having considered it, I find I'm quite in favor of the idea." Joy transformed his features. "Truly?" "Truly," she affirmed, "but I have conditions." "Name them," he said without hesitation. "I won't be merely an ornament in your New York home," she stated firmly. "I want to be a partner in all aspects of our life together." "I would expect nothing less," he assured her. "What else?" "We must spend time here at Willow Creek as well as in New York. My father would be welcome to live with us," Nathaniel finished. "Or we could maintain both homes, dividing our time between them." Eliza smiled, her last concern addressed before she could even voice it. "Then yes, Nathaniel Blackwood, I will marry you." He gathered her into his arms, his kiss a seal on their promise. As they stood together on the porch of her family home, Eliza knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two independent souls who had found in each other not completion, but amplification of their best qualities. Behind them, Samuel Montgomery watched from the window, his face alight with satisfaction. His matchmaking had succeeded beyond his hopes, bringing happiness not only to his beloved daughter but also to the son of his old friend. As he turned away to give the young couple their privacy, he murmured a quiet thanks to his late wife, certain that she had somehow guided this perfect union from beyond. In the garden, the first buds of spring were opening, a fitting symbol for the new life that Eliza and Nathaniel were beginning together, rooted in mutual respect, nurtured by shared experience, and blooming with the promise of enduring love.